The grand reception hall of the celestial spire stretched impossibly far, its crystalline architecture defying the laws of known physics. Holographic constellations danced across translucent walls, mapping out the intricate genetic lineage of the royal family. At the center of this architectural marvel stood Princess Seraphina, last heir to the most advanced civilization in the known galaxy. Her presence was both a blessing and a challenge. Generations of selective breeding had produced a being of extraordinary potential, a living repository of scientific brilliance, genetic perfection, and diplomatic complexity. The princess embodied centuries of careful genetic engineering, her very existence a testament to her species' most ambitious scientific achievement. The current gathering was more than a social event. It was a diplomatic crucible, a carefully orchestrated process of finding a suitable partner who could match the princess's extraordinary capabilities. 12 generations of royal lineage had created an almost mythical standard of partnership, a challenge that had broken the spirits of countless potential suitors. Diplomatic representatives from across the galaxy watched with a mixture of anticipation and dread. Each species had tried and failed to meet the impossible requirements. The quantum architects of Nexus Prime had developed complex probability matrices to demonstrate compatibility. The resonant singers of Harmony World had attempted to synchronize neural patterns with mathematical precision. Biomechanical engineers from the Crystalline Confederacy had proposed genetic recombination strategies that pushed the boundaries of known science. All had failed. Seraphina's selection criteria were brutally complex. A potential partner needed to demonstrate not just intellectual brilliance, but a holistic approach to innovation, strategic thinking, and evolutionary potential. Her genetic profile was a masterpiece of scientific engineering, each cell a testament to centuries of careful selection and advanced biotechnology. The current gathering represented the last hope for many galactic civilizations. To be chosen as a royal partner meant more than a personal alliance. It was a gateway to technological exchange, diplomatic cooperation, and potential evolutionary advancement. Entire species had invested decades of research, hoping to produce an individual who might catch the princess's discerning eye. Behind the elegant facade, political tensions simmered. The royal selection was more than a personal choice. It was a strategic decision that could reshape galactic power dynamics. Some civilizations had sent their absolute best. Others had resorted to genetic manipulation, hoping to create the perfect candidate. Seraphina moved through the hall with calculated grace. Her silvery bioluminescent skin shifted subtly, displaying complex neural patterns that hinted at the extraordinary processing power within. Each step was a carefully calculated movement, each gesture a demonstration of her unparalleled capabilities. The holographic displays surrounding her told a story of extraordinary potential. Genetic markers danced in three-dimensional projections, showing centuries of careful selection. Scientific achievements, diplomatic negotiations, and evolutionary markers created a living biography that hung in the air around her. Representatives from a dozen different species watched with a mixture of hope and resignation. They knew the odds. Hundreds of potential partners had been evaluated and rejected. The princess's standards were not just high, they were seemingly impossible. What they didn't know was that Seraphina was looking for something more than just technical perfection. Her search went beyond genetic compatibility or intellectual prowess. She sought a true partner, someone who could challenge her, grow with her, and see potential where others saw only limitations. The hall hummed with diplomatic tension. Each species had its own hopes, its own carefully prepared candidate. Quantum calculations, emotional resonance tests, and genetic compatibility matrices had been developed over decades. Entire research institutions had been dedicated to this single possibility. As the evening progressed, the princess remained aloof. Potential suitors approached, each believing they might be the one to break through her extraordinary defenses. But Seraphina's gaze remained distant, searching for something that no one had yet been able to provide. Little did they know that a solution would come from the most unexpected source. a species that most advanced civilizations considered barely noteworthy. Humanity was about to change everything. The first wave of suitors approached with carefully manufactured confidence. Representatives from the most advanced civilizations in the known galaxy had spent decades preparing for this moment, each believing they would be the one to unlock the princess's impossible standards. The quantum architects of Nexus Prime were first. Their candidate, a biomechanical marvel named Zoran, approached the challenge with mathematical precision. Holographic projections surrounded him, displaying complex probability matrices that mapped potential genetic compatibility to 11 decimal places. His entire being was a living algorithm, each movement calculated to demonstrate perfect efficiency. Zoran's presentation began with a three-dimensional representation of genetic potential. Quantum entanglement patterns danced around him, showing intricate connections between potential offspring, scientific advancement, and diplomatic stability. He spoke in perfect, emotionless tones, explaining how his genetic structure represented the absolute pinnacle of evolutionary potential. Princess Serafina listened with detached curiosity. Her neural interface picked apart every claim, every projection. Where Zoran saw certainty, she saw limitations. The presentation was technically flawless and completely devoid of anything resembling genuine innovation. The resonant singers of Harmony World took a different approach. Their candidate, Lyra, was a being of pure emotional intelligence. She approached the challenge as a complex symphony of neural resonance. Elaborate musical patterns emerged from her very being, attempting to demonstrate compatibility through emotional synchronization. Lyra's performance was breathtaking. Harmonic waves of pure emotion cascaded through the hall, each note a carefully constructed argument for compatibility. She showed how her neural patterns could synchronize with the princesses, how their emotional intelligence could create something greater than the sum of its parts. But Serafina remained unmoved. The performance was beautiful, technically perfect, and utterly predictable. The Crystalline Confederacy brought forward their most advanced candidate, a being named Prism, half organic, half crystalline. Prism represented a radical approach to genetic engineering. His body was a living computer, each molecular structure a potential solution to complex scientific challenges. Prism's demonstration involved a live genetic recombination simulation. Holographic projections showed how his molecular structure could adapt, how he could potentially create offspring with unprecedented capabilities. It was a technical marvel that would have impressed any other audience. The Biosynth Collective from the Spiral Arm approached with a different strategy. Their candidate was a collective intelligence, not a single being, but a carefully coordinated group mind that could adapt and respond with unprecedented flexibility. They presented themselves as a living solution to the princess's seemingly impossible requirements. Hours passed. Each civilization brought forward their best, their most carefully prepared candidate. Some approached with cold mathematical precision. Others tried emotional resonance. Some demonstrated technological marvel, while others showed genetic potential beyond anything previously conceived. Each failed. The problem wasn't a lack of capability. Each candidate was, by traditional measures, extraordinary. The issue was something far more fundamental. They all approached the challenge as a problem to be solved, a set of parameters to be met. Serafina was looking for something entirely different. As the final presentation concluded, the hall fell into a tense silence. Diplomatic representatives exchanged worried glances. Entire civilizations had invested decades of research, genetic engineering, and strategic planning into this moment. The princess stood silent, her neural patterns flickering with something that might have been disappointment or anticipation. In the shadows of the Grand Hall, a single human observer watched. Dr. Marcus Chen wasn't part of the official delegation. He wasn't even supposed to be here. But something about the entire process had caught his attention, a fundamental flaw in how these advanced civilizations approached the concept of potential. He knew something they didn't. Compatibility wasn't about meeting a set of predetermined standards. It was about something far more complex, something that couldn't be measured by genetic matrices or emotional resonance. As the last of the candidates departed, a subtle shift occurred in the hall's ambient energy. Something was coming. Something unexpected. The diplomatic protocol was clear. Each candidate would have precisely 3 standard galactic hours to present their case. Dr. Marcus Chen wasn't even on the official list of potential suitors. In fact, most diplomatic representatives considered humans a relatively unremarkable species, technologically young, culturally scattered, and seemingly lacking the refined genetic engineering of more advanced civilizations. Diplomatic security had missed him initially. Chen moved through the advanced screening systems with an ease that would have been impossible for anyone else. His credentials were unremarkable. A xenobiological researcher with multiple interdisciplinary specializations. Nothing about his file suggested anything extraordinary. In the antechamber, he reviewed his notes with a calm that bordered on indifference. The holographic displays around him flickered with complex scientific notations, a personal research project that had consumed the last 5 years of his life. Most would have seen a jumble of incomprehensible data. To Chen, it was a living, breathing theory that could reshape understanding of quantum information transfer. Princess Seraphina's neural interface picked up an anomaly, a subtle disruption in the diplomatic monitoring systems. Something, or someone, had entered the screening area without triggering a single alarm. When Dr. Chen entered the Grand Hall, he brought none of the elaborate presentations of previous candidates. No holographic displays, no genetic matrices, no emotional resonance fields, just a simple data tablet and an expression of genuine curiosity. The royal guards tensed. Diplomatic representatives from a dozen advanced civilizations looked on with a mixture of confusion and mild amusement. A human. Here, it was almost laughable. Chen approached the princess with a deliberate, measured pace. His body language was relaxed but precise. Each movement calculated, but not artificially so. Where previous candidates had approached with desperation or technical perfection, he moved with something far more intriguing, genuine interest. "I apologize for the unconventional approach," he began, his voice carrying across the hall with unexpected clarity. "I'm aware that I'm not a traditional candidate." Princess Seraphina's neural interface began analyzing him instantaneously. Genetic scans, behavioral projections, linguistic pattern recognition. All the tools at her disposal began decoding this unexpected arrival. What they found was something entirely different from any previous candidate. Chen's background was a tapestry of unexpected connections. A xenobiologist by training, but with deep specializations that crossed multiple scientific disciplines. His research papers revealed something extraordinary, an ability to see connections where others saw only boundaries. He didn't ask for an opportunity. Instead, he began discussing a theoretical model he'd been developing. A breakthrough in quantum entanglement that challenged centuries of established scientific thought. The presentation was unlike anything the royal court had ever witnessed. Most scientific presentations were linear, predictable. Chen's approach was a living, breathing exploration of possibility. He didn't just present data. He told a story of scientific discovery, each concept building on the last in ways that were both logical and wildly innovative. The diplomatic hall grew silent. Representatives from advanced civilizations found themselves leaning forward, genuinely intrigued for the first time that evening. Chen's theory suggested a fundamental reimagining of how information could be transferred across quantum networks. It wasn't just a scientific proposal. It was a new way of understanding connection itself. Princess Seraphina's neural interface worked overtime. The human's thought patterns were unlike anything she'd encountered, where previous candidates had presented perfectly structured arguments. Chen's mind worked like a living ecosystem, complex, adaptive, constantly evolving. Most remarkably, he didn't seem to care whether he would be selected. His presentation was driven by something far more profound, a genuine love of discovery, a passion for understanding that transcended any personal ambition. As he concluded, the hall remained in stunned silence. The human hadn't just presented a scientific theory. He had demonstrated a fundamentally different approach to intelligence, to potential, to the very nature of connection. Something had changed in the room. The princess's neural patterns flickered with an emotion that might have been, if such an advanced being could experience such a thing, excitement. The unexpected had arrived, and nothing would be the same again. The private consultation chamber was a marvel of technological sophistication. Quantum-stabilized walls shifted with holographic representations of complex scientific data. Here, away from the public diplomatic arena, Princess Serafina would conduct her most rigorous assessment. Dr. Marcus Chen seemed entirely at ease, a stark contrast to the nervous candidates who had come before him. Where others had approached this moment with trembling anticipation, he displayed a calm curiosity that bordered on academic detachment. Your quantum entanglement theory challenges nearly everything we understand about information transfer, the princess began, her neural interface already probing the depths of Chen's proposal. Most researchers would approach such a breakthrough with rigid defensiveness. You seem almost indifferent to its potential revolutionary impact. Chen smiled, a genuine, unguarded expression that momentarily caught the princess off guard. Science isn't about defending ideas, he responded. It's about constantly reimagining what's possible. The chamber's holographic displays began to dance with their combined intellectual output. Chen's theory wasn't just a scientific proposal. It was a living, breathing exploration of potential. He didn't present fixed conclusions, but instead offered a framework of discovery. Serafina's neural processing reached new levels of complexity. Chen's mind worked differently from any intelligence she had previously encountered. Where advanced civilizations saw knowledge as a structured hierarchy, he approached it as an adaptive ecosystem. Their conversation defied traditional scientific discourse. Chen would introduce a concept, and the princess would immediately challenge its fundamental assumptions. But instead of becoming defensive, he would eagerly explore the challenge, often finding entirely new avenues of exploration in the process. The Royal Scientific Archives contained millennia of recorded intellectual exchanges. None had ever been quite like this. Chen's background was a testament to human intellectual flexibility. His academic history showed multiple disciplines: xenobiology, quantum physics, cultural anthropology, computational theory. Where other species specialized, humans seemed to thrive on interconnection. Your approach suggests that knowledge isn't a destination, Serafina observed, but a continuous journey of discovery. Exactly, Chen responded. Most advanced civilizations see knowledge as something to be conquered. Humans see it as something to be explored, challenged, reimagined. The chamber's quantum interfaces began to reflect their intellectual exchange. Traditional scientific monitoring systems struggled to categorize what was happening. This wasn't just an exchange of information. It was a live, dynamic process of mutual intellectual creation. Chen introduced concepts that seemed almost paradoxical. He spoke of scientific understanding as a form of collaborative storytelling, where each theory was less a fixed truth and more a working hypothesis open to continuous refinement. The princess found herself genuinely challenged. Her entire existence had been about achieving perfection, in genetics, in intellectual potential, in diplomatic strategy. Chen presented a fundamentally different worldview. Perfection wasn't a state to be achieved, but a process of continuous exploration. Their discussion moved beyond theoretical physics. They explored cultural evolution, technological development, the nature of intelligence itself. Chen didn't just share information, he invited intellectual collaboration. Most remarkably, he seemed to derive genuine joy from the process of discovery. Where previous candidates had approached the royal assessment as a test to be passed, Chen saw it as an opportunity for mutual learning. The quantum interfaces surrounding them began to reflect something unprecedented. Their intellectual exchange wasn't just a transfer of information, it was a live, dynamic process of mutual creation. Traditional scientific monitoring systems couldn't categorize what was happening. Hours passed, though time seemed almost irrelevant in the quantum-stabilized chamber. The princess's neural interfaces were working at capacities they had never before achieved. Chen didn't just match her intellectual potential, he expanded it. As their discussion concluded, something fundamental had changed. The princess realized she was no longer assessing a potential partner. They were exploring the boundaries of knowledge together. The Royal Scientific Archives would later classify this as the most extraordinary intellectual exchange in recorded galactic history. But in that moment, it was simply two minds discovering the infinite potential of collaborative thinking. The Genetic Compatibility Analysis Laboratory was a marvel of technological sophistication. Quantum sequencers hummed with unprecedented energy, processing data at speeds that would have overwhelmed most computational systems. This was the final frontier of the royal selection process, a test that had defeated every previous candidate. Dr. Marcus Chen arrived with none of the nervous anticipation that had characterized previous suitors. His file was unusual, a compilation of interdisciplinary research that defied traditional categorization, where other species saw specialization as the pinnacle of scientific achievement. Chen's background told a different story. The primary genetic scanner began its analysis. Sophisticated quantum algorithms started mapping Chen's genetic structure, looking for the near-impossible combination of traits the royal lineage required. Most candidates generated predictable data patterns, neat, linear, and ultimately disappointing. Chen's genetic map was something entirely different. Human DNA had always been considered primitive by advanced galactic standards. Most sophisticated civilizations viewed humanity's genetic structure as chaotic, unrefined, a canvas of potential rather than a precision-engineered masterpiece. The scanner's initial readings suggested something far more complex. Where other species had engineered their genetic structures into rigid, specialized patterns, human DNA displayed an extraordinary flexibility. Each genetic marker seemed to exist in a state of potential, capable of adaptive responses that defied traditional understanding. The lead genetic researcher, a biomechanical expert from the Crystalline Confederacy, watched the data with increasing fascination. Chen's genetic structure was less a fixed blueprint and more a living, adaptive system. It suggested an evolutionary approach that was fundamentally different from any known species. Adaptive potential wasn't just a theoretical concept in Chen's genetic makeup. His DNA showed evidence of rapid environmental adaptation, a capacity for learning that was encoded at the molecular level. Where other species saw genetics as a predetermined path, humans seemed to view their genetic structure as a dynamic conversation with their environment. The scanner revealed layers of complexity that went beyond traditional genetic analysis. Chen's genetic markers showed evidence of multiple ancestral adaptations, each a testament to humanity's capacity for survival and innovation. There were markers of genetic modifications from extreme environments, evidence of biological responses to challenges that would have destroyed less adaptable species. Most intriguingly, the genetic scan revealed something unprecedented. Chen's DNA contained adaptive markers that suggested not just individual potential, but a species-wide capacity for collective growth. Where other civilizations saw genetics as an individual trait, humans seemed to encode potential for collective adaptation. The princess's neural interface received a live feed of the genetic analysis. Her own extensively engineered genetic structure had been designed to seek the most precise, most predictable combination of traits. Chen's genetic potential suggested something far more interesting, a living system of continuous adaptation. Traditional genetic compatibility tests looked for precise alignments, perfect mathematical resonances. Chen's genetic structure refused to be confined by such limited parameters. It was less a fixed blueprint and more a dynamic proposal of potential. The research team worked with increasing excitement. This wasn't just another genetic analysis. They were witnessing something extraordinary, a fundamentally different approach to evolutionary potential. Chen watched the process with genuine curiosity. Where other candidates would have been nervous, he seemed fascinated by the technological marvel around him. He asked questions that revealed a deep understanding of genetic science, but approached each concept with an openness that went beyond traditional scientific thinking. As the analysis concluded, the lead researcher turned to Chen with an expression that mixed professional fascination with something closer to wonder. "Your genetic structure," she said, "challenges everything we understand about evolutionary potential." Chen simply smiled. "Potential," he responded, "is rarely about what we already know." The genetic compatibility test, the final, supposedly insurmountable challenge, had not just been passed. It had been completely reimagined. Something fundamental had changed. The royal selection process would never be the same again. The final assessment chamber was unlike any diplomatic space in the known galaxy. Quantum reality generators created an environment that shifted between physical and conceptual spaces, testing not just individual capabilities, but the fundamental nature of problem-solving and collaborative potential. Dr. Marcus Chen stood at the center of a holographic maelstrom that represented the most complex challenge ever devised by the Royal Scientific Council. It was more than a test. It was a living simulation that adapted in real time, designed to be fundamentally unpassable by any known species. The challenge emerged as a multidimensional problem that defied traditional understanding. It required simultaneous resolution of a complex quantum computational paradox, an intricate diplomatic scenario involving multiple conflicting galactic civilizations, a biological crisis threatening an entire star system, a philosophical dilemma that challenged the nature of intelligence itself. Previous candidates had broken under the sheer complexity. The challenge was designed to be impossible, a final, ultimate test that no single intelligence could hope to solve. Chen approached it differently. Where other candidates would have attempted to solve each component sequentially, he began to see the connections between seemingly unrelated challenges. The quantum computational paradox wasn't just a mathematical problem. It was intimately linked to the diplomatic scenario. The biological crisis revealed underlying communication patterns that could resolve the philosophical dilemma. The royal scientific observers watched in stunned silence. Most advanced civilizations approached complex problems with specialized, rigid thinking. Each challenge would be assigned to specific experts, with minimal cross-communication. Humans, Chen demonstrated, saw problems as interconnected ecosystems of potential. His approach was a living demonstration of adaptive intelligence. He didn't just solve the challenge, he reimagined its very foundation. The quantum computational paradox required a level of simultaneous processing that had defeated the most advanced artificial intelligences. Chen's solution wasn't about raw computational power. It was about understanding the fundamental nature of the problem itself. He introduced a revolutionary approach that suggested computation wasn't about solving a fixed equation, but about understanding the dynamic relationships between different systems of thought. The diplomatic scenario was equally complex. Multiple galactic civilizations were locked in a multi-layered conflict with seemingly irreconcilable differences. Previous attempts at resolution had failed spectacularly. Chen's approach wasn't about finding a compromise, but about understanding the underlying motivations that drove the conflict. He began to map the emotional and cultural ecosystems of each civilization, revealing connection points that no traditional diplomatic approach had ever discovered. The biological crisis presented a challenge of unprecedented complexity. An entire star system faced potential ecological collapse, with multiple interconnected environmental systems on the brink of total failure. Traditional scientific approaches had failed to develop a comprehensive solution. Chen's approach was breathtakingly simple and complex. He didn't just see the problem as a scientific challenge. He viewed it as a living, adaptive system that required a holistic approach to understanding. The philosophical dilemma cut to the heart of intelligence itself. What defines consciousness? How do different forms of intelligence interact and evolve? Previous attempts to address this have been limited by species-specific perspectives. Chen approached it as a dynamic exploration of potential, rather than a fixed philosophical problem to be solved. As the challenge progressed, the reality generators began to respond in unprecedented ways. The very environment of the assessment chamber started to reflect Chen's approach. Adaptive, interconnected, constantly evolving. The Royal Scientific Council watched as something extraordinary unfolded. This wasn't just a test being passed. It was a fundamental reimagining of what intelligence could mean. Hours passed, though time seemed almost irrelevant in the quantum adaptive space. Chen didn't just solve the challenge. He transformed it, revealing layers of potential that no one had previously imagined possible. As the final simulations concluded, a profound silence filled the chamber. The ultimate challenge, designed to be impossible, had not just been solved. It had been completely reimagined. The Royal Council chamber erupted in a cacophony of conflicting emotions. Representatives from a dozen advanced civilizations struggled to comprehend what they had just witnessed. Dr. Marcus Chen's performance during the ultimate challenge had shattered every established understanding of intelligence, problem-solving, and potential. Holographic displays flickered with fragments of his revolutionary approach. Each replay revealed new layers of complexity, new depths of interconnected thinking that defied traditional scientific categorization. Where other species saw boundaries, Chen had seen possibilities. The quantum architects of Nexus Prime were the first to break the silence. Their lead researcher, a being of pure computational logic, approached the princess with a report that read more like a philosophical revelation than a scientific analysis. "Your Highness," the researcher began, "we are witnessing something beyond our current understanding of intelligence." Dr. Chen's approach is not just a method of problem-solving. It is a fundamental reimagining of how intelligence can interact with complexity. The resonant singers of Harmony World presented their analysis next. Their neural network had been working overtime, attempting to decode the intricate patterns of Chen's thinking. Their conclusion was both fascinating and deeply unsettling. Human intelligence was not a fixed system, but a dynamic, adaptive ecosystem. Most advanced civilizations viewed intelligence as a structured, hierarchical system. Each piece of knowledge had its place. Each solution followed a predetermined path. Chen had demonstrated something entirely different: intelligence as a living, breathing, constantly evolving process. The diplomatic implications were staggering. This wasn't just about a royal selection process anymore. This was about understanding a fundamentally different approach to existence itself. The princess's neural interface worked at unprecedented levels of complexity. Chen's performance had done more than challenge her expectations. He had expanded her very understanding of potential. Representatives from the Crystalline Confederacy brought forward computational models that attempted to map Chen's approach. Each model failed, revealing more about the limitations of their own thinking than about Chen's method. What made humans unique wasn't any single capability. It was their capacity for radical reimagination. Where other species saw challenges as problems to be solved, humans saw them as opportunities for discovery. The Royal Archives would later note this as a pivotal moment in galactic history. It wasn't just about one individual or one species. It was about a fundamental shift in understanding intelligence, potential, and collaborative thinking. Chen himself remained remarkably calm. Where other candidates would have been seeking validation, he seemed more interested in the process of discovery. He engaged with the researchers, not as a potential royal consort, but as a fellow explorer of knowledge. The Biosynth Collective presented their analysis as a living, adaptive presentation. Holographic representations showed how Chen's approach defied traditional computational models. His intelligence wasn't about having the right answers. It was about continuously reimagining the questions. Political representatives began to understand the deeper implications. This wasn't just a scientific breakthrough. This was a fundamental challenge to how advanced civilizations understood themselves. The princess found herself in a position no royal heir had ever experienced. The selection process had always been about finding a perfect match, someone who could meet a predetermined set of standards. Chen had done something entirely different. He had expanded the very concept of what those standards could mean. As the day progressed, the initial shock began to transform into something else: excitement, curiosity, a profound sense that something extraordinary was unfolding. The Royal Council's final report would later be classified as a turning point in galactic understanding. It wasn't just about one human's extraordinary capabilities. It was about a fundamental reimagining of intelligence, potential, and collaborative discovery. Chen represented something more than an individual. He was a living demonstration of humanity's extraordinary potential, a species defined not by what it knew, but by its capacity to continuously learn, adapt, and reimagine what was possible. As the diplomatic chamber buzzed with unprecedented energy, one thing became crystal clear: nothing would ever be the same again. The final ceremony was unlike any diplomatic event in recorded galactic history. Where previous royal selections had been rigid, formal affairs, this moment pulsed with unprecedented potential. Dr. Marcus Chen stood at the center of a chamber that seemed to breathe with collective anticipation. Representatives from 1,000 worlds watched as the princess made her selection. The traditional royal protocols, millennia-old systems of genetic, intellectual, and diplomatic evaluation, had been completely transformed. Chen's approach had done more than pass the royal selection process. He had fundamentally reimagined what such a process could mean. The royal herald began the traditional proclamation, his voice carrying the weight of countless generations. But something was different. The language itself seemed to struggle to capture the magnitude of what was happening. In recognition of extraordinary potential, the herald began, of a partnership that transcends traditional understanding. Most royal selections were about finding a perfect match, a combination of genetic potential, intellectual capacity, and diplomatic compatibility. Chen represented something entirely different. He wasn't a perfect solution. He was a living invitation to continuous discovery. The princess stepped forward, her neural interface projecting a holographic representation of their potential together. But this wasn't a traditional display of genetic compatibility or strategic alignment. It was a living, breathing map of possibility. Streams of data danced between them, not as fixed information, but as adaptive, interconnected patterns of potential. Where previous royal partnerships had been about consolidating power, this was about expanding understanding. Diplomatic representatives from advanced civilizations watched in stunned silence. This was more than a royal selection. This was a fundamental reimagining of what partnership could mean. The quantum architects of Nexus Prime generated computational models that tried to predict the potential of this union. Each model failed, revealing more about the limitations of their own thinking than about the actual potential before them. Chen's approach to partnership was as revolutionary as his approach to problem-solving. He didn't see this as a fixed arrangement, but as a continuous process of mutual discovery. Where other species saw relationships as strategic calculations, humans saw them as living, adaptive connections. The royal chamber itself seemed to respond to their connection. Quantum reality generators created holographic representations that shifted and changed, reflecting the dynamic nature of their potential together. Most fascinating was how Chen approached this moment. Where other candidates would have been overwhelmed by the significance, he remained genuinely curious. His attention was less on the ceremonial moment and more on the potential for discovery. The princess's neural interface revealed something unprecedented. Their connection wasn't about matching predetermined standards. It was about creating something entirely new, a partnership that was greater than the sum of its individual parts. Genetic analyses, which had previously been about precise matching, now showed something extraordinary. Their potential offspring would not just inherit traits, but would be living invitations to continuous adaptation and discovery. Political representatives began to understand the deeper implications. This wasn't just about one royal selection. This was about a fundamental challenge to how advanced civilizations understood partnership, potential, and collective growth. The ceremony concluded with a gesture that broke every established protocol. Instead of a formal, predetermined exchange, Chen and the princess shared a moment of genuine connection. It was less a diplomatic ritual and more a mutual invitation to explore potential together. As the ceremony concluded, the ripple effects began to spread. Thousands of worlds received the transmission, witnessing a moment that would reshape galactic understanding. The royal archives would later note this as a pivotal moment, not just in diplomatic history, but in the broader understanding of intelligence, potential, and collaborative discovery. Chen represented more than an individual. He was a living demonstration of humanity's extraordinary capacity, a species defined not by what it knew, but by its willingness to continuously learn, adapt, and reimagine what was possible. As the diplomatic chamber dissolved into a cascade of holographic potential, one thing became crystal clear. Everything was about to change.